All right, welcome back. It's 2025. Again, my name is David Whalen, and this is the Raising Men podcast. Today, I am blessed and lucky enough to have Dr. Dana Lis with us today. She's going to be talking about, or we're going to be exploring the idea of digestion and the impact that it has on performance nutrition. As everyone knows, nutrition is a very important piece in my life, and I'm again grateful to have Dr. Dana Lis on here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. No, I'm honored to be on here, and I really appreciate what you're doing with this podcast and really getting evidence-based but practical information to parents, because this is the phase in kids' lives when it's kind of make or break for a lot of aspects of health, and also as kids, regardless of what age and what their goals are with sport, this sort of developmental phase is where nutrition is super, super critical. But a lot of young athletes don't actually work with like a proper, performance nutritionist until they're well into their elite years. And these are the years when it really does matter. So any opportunity, I can take to chat with, fellow parents of young athletes, I really am honored and grateful that you asked me to be on your show.
Well, thank you. I know, we're both close with Jennifer Gibson, and you guys are working on the performance nutrition professionals. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So Jen and I have both, been in the world of elite sport across Olympic and professional sport for about 20 years each. Jen's been around a little bit longer than me, sort of different directions, but we've both, kind of been all over elite sport. I've worked in Olympic sport in Canada, Australia. I did my PhD in sort of nutritional physiology and sort of the gut health piece. And I currently am on my 6th season working as a consultant with the Golden State Warriors MBA. Wow. So still always had, kind of one foot in practice, one foot in research. But the one piece that, Jen and I, kind of after several years of, working in separate parts of the world and reconnected, we're both Canadian, was that, really the practical and elite training for practitioners. Like there was a huge gap in terms of like, how do we help practitioners work at that elite cutting edge, in that elite cutting edge space? And partly with me being in research, I'm really networked and kind of driving that space, but also learn how to do that in the real sport environment and learn sort of the hard skills, soft skills. A lot of what we found practitioners were getting frustrated with, like, dietitians, sport dietitians, was they were doing a lot of food service. And that is very important, obviously. But after a few years, you're like, I need something more. And am I really impacting performance? So really trying to give the skills to practitioners they need to work at that elite level and truly impact performance, which also comes down to understanding, a physiology as well, not just nutrition, but the physiology and the mechanisms of what you're trying to do.
That's awesome. I know you guys are on Instagram and I follow you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So if anybody's interested in following Dana, if you don't mind, just obviously just letting everybody know what the handle is.
It's Performance Nutrition Pros. We're up till now, it's kind of just been Jen and I doing everything. And we're in the process of finding like a social media expert to help us with that aspect, because we do realize it is, in this present day, important. Yes. I wouldn't say we're like a huge education content. That's not our goal. Like we're just trying to.
You guys have some great stuff though on Instagram. I've shared it and I love it, and the conversations you guys have had, and that's kind of how I came across your profile and we got to this point. So
excellent. Yeah,
I definitely think people should absolutely follow it. With that said, what interests me, obviously I have 3 boys. Part of why I wanted to do the Raising Men podcast. What interests me is and I work in the sports nutrition space, and I find, there's a lot of pseudo experts that exist, in nutrition. I'm sure at every supper table we sit at, everyone has their opinion and their advice. And I've learned over the years to sort of keep my mouth shut. Because it just, you end up having to argue things with people, and it's frustrating.
I've mastered the nod and smile.
Yeah, it's just
that's awesome. That works for you. Cool.
So what I wanted, and I know this is an area of your expertise, so I wanted to really ask you, how does digestion impact performance? And I think it's, obviously, I believe it's super important, but from your perspective, what are things that families, kids, athletes should really know, and how important is it, what you're putting into your body and how it impacts, your play on the field, on the court, on the ice, etc.
Absolutely. And I think, through the work I did throughout my PhD and some of the work I continue to do, I've really learned a lot about how important and how central, from a very molecular level and learning all these different fancy pathways, but how central your gut and your gut health is to almost every organ in your body. And there's a lot of research happening now, understanding how different aspects of the gut microbiome and gut health directly impact aspects of performance. One example would be lactate metabolism. So the bugs in your gut, there are certain strains that are important for how your body, how your muscles and how your body uses and metabolizes lactate, how your body uses different macronutrients, so carb.
Just want to stop you for 1 second. I apologize.
No
But
worries.
when we say lactate, and this is for the general person listening,
Perfect,
somebody
yeah.
watching, we'd be talking about lactic acid, and a lot of the time that lactic acid is you might relate that to the burn in a workout, or when you're playing on the field and your legs are tired and sore. A lot of that is in relation to the amount of lactic acid that your body's building up. And your body's ability to rid the lactic acid will help you perform better. Would that be a good explanation?
Yeah, I'll add one more piece to that. And I think, lactate and lactic acid have been used interchangeably and then have been a little bit led to be a bad thing, without getting into explaining different metabolic cycles. Your body actually really likes lactate. It can turn that through a slower process, but it can turn that back into fuel.
Oh, wow.
So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to keep that kind of cycle going.
Okay.
When you fatigue, when your muscles are fatiguing from that, what you would say burn, it's actually more acidosis, and it's just a buildup of hydrogen ions. And then you kind of you fail from fatigue. So it's sort of related, but not directly. And when we talk about using lactate for a performance benefit in a way, it's more about using lactate to put back into a fuel cycle so you can continue to produce energy, or ATP. It's like another way to put energy currency into your bank.
Okay. Yeah.
There's some cool research looking at athletes, how their microbiome adapts to be able to improve that aspect of their physiology.
And again, just because I know there will be people listening and trying to understand. So could you explain the microbiome itself? What would that mean when you say microbiome? What would that mean to somebody that really doesn't understand?
Yeah, and I'll take a step back to your original question. You were asking about digestion, and when I think about digestion, I automatically kind of go to the microbiome, which is basically all of if you're going to, you'll see probiotics, you'll see the word probiotic and prebiotic. And there's this whole world of microbes in your gut that are actually really critical for so many aspects of how your body works. And we're learning it, it's complex, and it's not there's a recipe book for this stuff. We're learning a lot right now. It's a very kind of innovative space. But there are a lot of gut gurus online that are throwing around the term gut microbiome, gut health, and it's a lot more complex than just taking a supplement or eating some fibers.
Yes.
So when I say gut microbiome, it's there's all these bugs in your gut that there's different types, different strains, and they all have different roles in telling your body and helping to regulate all sorts of different things. Things from your mood to how you manage your blood sugar levels to inflammation. So we know that there are some things that happen in your life that can kind of disturb your gut. We call that, the word that we'll usually use is dysbiosis. One example would be antibiotics. Antibiotics, I think, are great. They work in some cases. We need them for some illnesses. But they can also, what they also do is they can kind of wreak havoc on your microbiome and really disturb your gut microbiome, and in some cases kind of wreck it.
Okay.
So without getting too much into that road, your gut microbiome is really important for how you break down food, how you digest food and the foods you eat, and the foods you eat and the frequency and the types are important for how healthy your gut microbiome is. If your kid is a really, really picky eater and they're kind of like a butter pasta kid, and maybe they'll have some baby carrots, they're not getting a lot of like prebiotic fibers, or so things like some of the fibers you'll get in all sorts of different fruits and vegetables. Or a lot of you'll hear the term like polyphenols, which are kind of like a phytonutrient that just helps with keeping a really healthy gut environment. I kind of think about it as your gut lining. You like this really, like some of the microbes really like a moist, really healthy intestinal lining, and the polyphenols play a role in maintaining that. So if you have a kid that's really like picky and they're butter pasta and like a couple of veggies and that's it, they're the prebiotic fibers that they're eating to really create a healthy gut environment are probably pretty limited. So over the course of time, there could be digestion issues. They could be have trouble with certain foods, get more bloated, their kind of gut motility slowed down, not be able to tolerate certain foods. And it's really like, it's hard as a parent to, if you have a really picky eater, it's exhausting. Every single meal is a battle. And there are, tips and tricks that we can do to try to figure out, what fibers are the most important for my kid and how do I get those in ways that are going to be sustainable and they're not going to be a huge fight every time. But then also just like when I sort of talk about like fibers and variety, those are all the things like having a lot. Sometimes I'll throw the number out of like try to have 20, 30 different fruits and vegetables a week to get all of those different prebiotic fibers into your gut to feed a really healthy gut microbiome. If you start doing that and like checking off a list, it's hard. It's not that easy, especially with a really busy sport family.
You need a PhD.
Yeah, sometimes you do. And it's simple. It can be things like just even trying like one new recipe a week, like even a minestrone soup type thing is you can throw a lot of different stuff into a soup or into a smoothie, even into like zucchini bread, you can sneak stuff in there.
So
yeah,
not to interrupt, but in some of my one of a past mentor, and I studied Ayurveda, sort of an ancient form of herbal medicine for quite a while. And I guess, again, to explain to anyone that may be listening that doesn't fully understand some of the conversation, it's really about balance and harmony. And when I say harmony, feeding all of those, living organisms that it's in your digestive system and treating all of them like its own balanced environment. And as you mentioned, the antibiotic thing, antibiotics will really destroy that microbiome and kill off a lot of those healthy bacteria and positive environment that you have happening in your system. And so I'm assuming if that's helping the conversation here, Dana, feel free to correct me.
Absolutely.
But I feel like that's the challenge. And then when we talk about performance nutrition, it's really finding an optimal balance within that digestive system so that you can perform again optimally and achieve your goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what happens with my family and like a lot of kids too is we're so busy and we get into a very routine that we can manage, eating a lot of the same foods. Sometimes it's like bars and stuff that are chucked in the car,
fast food
stuff
restaurants. And
I used to do McDonald's. I used to figure skate, and then Wednesday was my like day I could get a supersized Big Mac meal after skating. When I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. I just didn't know any better. Nor did my family. And it was like, it was a treat. And treats are okay for sure, but obviously balanced. And I think one thing just coming out of the last few years, we've all learned a lot more about the immune system and about immune health, and your gut is actually your body's biggest immune organ. We don't think about the gut that way. We're like, it digests food and it comes in one end, goes out the other. But it's actually your gut barrier, your intestinal barrier, basically is your barrier between what stuff that should stay out of your body or stuff that can get through that barrier. And what's interesting with exercise and more strenuous exercise, endurance exercise, you've probably heard that, when let's say you're doing dry land training for hockey, hot day, hot outside, humid, that causes stress on your gut, as well as the intensity. And then in addition, if there's an endurance component, all of those factors are factors that actually put stress on the gut. And what I mean by stress is that when you're in those scenarios, so heat, dehydration, and your blood is being shunted away from what's called your splanchnic organs, so your gut organs, to your working muscles, your legs, your arms, and you're getting less blood and nutrients and oxygen going to the cells of your gut organs, so your intestinal barrier, you actually, it affects the motility and how well your gut is working temporarily. But also you can get little breaks in your intestinal barrier, so you can get, kind of like in a way, you'll hear the term like leaky gut or runner's gut. But it's like a bit of intestinal injury. It heals. But if that's, you're kind of working at that intense level day after day, your body does do a certain level of adaptation. So it's not like you're constantly having leaky gut and you're going to have gut problems your whole life. Athletes, like anything else, your gut is an adaptable organ. But just knowing that, this kind of gut stress does happen as part of strenuous exercise. How do I mitigate it? How do I help keep my gut as healthy as possible? And that's where, the prebiotics and the variety in your diet are key. Protein intake, hydration for sure is a very, very simple thing that will really keep your gut barrier working well. So just thinking about, what are the things that you can do for gut health that help support, digestion, and making sure that nutrients that you're eating are getting absorbed well, and your body is getting all of the nutrients it needs to rebuild and adapt and keep its immune system strong. And
so for the sake of the podcast, what would you say, and obviously we could probably go on for a long time, but what would you say are keys that must do's or do not, things that you would say stay away from, that would help athletes of any age really, and just, general consumers, have an optimize their gut health to perform as best possible?
Perfect. Yeah. So I would say, let's start, with looking at what are the factors in your environment that could contribute to suboptimal gut health. So if you're training outside, heat and hydration. So if you have an athlete or yourself, it's summertime in Ontario, it's hot and humid. I cannot take it there anymore in the heat of summer. I'm not adapted to that anymore. So, staying hydrated.
Okay.
And you can check your urine color. Apple juice or lemonade should look more like lemonade. And, you can, it can be a simple check of just check what color your urine is. And if it looks like apple juice, you're probably pretty dehydrated. But just staying on top of hydration and also trying to cool.
Is there a type, not to interrupt, but is there a type? Because I feel like hydration now is this big marketing thing, right? Everybody's got a hydration formula, a hydration product. There's so much out there. And so from my background, I love the idea of spring water and the idea of a healthy alkaline mineral type water. But now with marketing, there's these sugar-free formulas and high amino acid formulas and, extremely high sodium formulas. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on those, because again, a lot of the people listening will be, well, I've heard of these different drinks that they're sold at the grocery store or the gas station, and everyone's trying to really find the best way to hydrate throughout the day. So,
yes, perfect. I would say most people honestly are fine with water. And And then there are scenarios where, heavy sweaters, salty sweaters, and you can kind of tell if you're a salty sweater, you'll have just more salt. You'll have like that grime on your face when it dries
Yeah.
out. Or your jersey will be a little bit white and salty.
Mm-hmm.
You can use like a oral rehydration solution. The one I use a lot is Drip Drop.
Okay.
It's just the formulation it's formulated with like the sodium levels and the small amount of glucose in there is
Mm-hmm.
formulated to kind of just rehydrate a little bit faster. There's like certain ratios your body likes.
Mm-hmm.
There's like sort of easy explanation of that. So yeah, Drip Drop is sort of my go-to.
Yeah.
And it tastes good. That's like kids don't like salty drinks. They don't like tasting weird.
Yeah.
Some amino acid drinks can be kind of bitter. Drip Drop, like their grape flavor is gold. Love it.
Mm-hmm. I love grape. That's one of my favorite flavors too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I think also just as adults too, like I'll I do sports and stuff too, and I'll use electrolytes to rehydrate or prehydrate or during.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the one thing I've noticed as an adult is how my body responds to sodium has changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Where with some sodium products, I'll actually notice I really bloat. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
actually see my hands and underneath my eyes actually bloat from too much sodium.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just sort of just been changes in my physiology as I get into my middle-aged years, unfortunately. But just also like, so too much sodium is a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't personally use, in most scenarios, those really high sodium products.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time and a place for those, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's something I would use every day.
I almost feel like there's a time and a place for a lot, like for different types of hydration. Like, there's this anti-sugar movement, and I've always said like there's a time and a place for sugar. Like if you're extremely dehydrated and you need something fast, or even post-exercise, to me, having a little bit of sugar in your hydration makes a lot of sense. Maybe not so much so before exercise. But yeah, I think really talking about that hydration topic, again, it's become big marketing and letting people understand that a lot of what you're hearing is not always correct.
Absolutely. And if you really look at it in context, like, okay, there's the sugar-free hydration formulas and the normal sugar containing, which have like 5 grams of sugar. Like it's just so little, it's just nominal. But then, people get worked up. Like, oh, I definitely want sugar-free. I don't want my kid having that sugar.
Yeah.
It's 5 grams. It's like a teaspoon. It's like, and they've just, done 2 hours of sports.
Yeah.
It's okay. It will be just fine. And it actually helps improve the absorption of the sodium across the sodium glucose transporter. So there's a time and a place, and I wouldn't worry about 5 grams.
Yeah, I would think as long as it's not an extreme situation. And the same would be the sugar and the sodium, kind of in the same space. It's like it's all really dependent on what you need at that moment in time. But as you said, a good quality water hydration in most cases would be absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next piece I would say is like, kind of looking at your just your meals throughout the day. And it's hard in scenarios where sometimes kids get school lunches. Sometimes, you're just kind of trying to get kids out the door in the morning. You're like, here's some cereal, go.
Yeah.
Or, kids that just don't like eating breakfast. And I try to like, everything is, what's workable for you. What's like, it's all, kind of the whole behavior change piece. If I give you 6 million things to do, what's realistic? None of them. Simple things are like, just check that you have 1 or 2 fruits or vegetables or different colors every meal. So if you have breakfast and your kid really likes cereal, will they have some blueberries in there? Will they drink a little bit of, beetroot juice or beetroot ginger juice? Or, is there little things that they might even have, a concentrated shot of? And I'm not saying you need to go buy a juicer, but just those are some things that I've found like some younger athletes kind of get excited about. They're like, yeah, I'll try that. They get to, and I would sometimes go into my son's class and we'll do different, just nutrition stuff and just for fun. And they love making smoothies. They love juicing all sorts of crazy stuff. And, they'll make faces and stuff, but they drink it. And it's kind of fun. Yes, it's time consuming. It's messy. And I'm not saying, again, that you have to juice, but it is an easy way to get a lot of different stuff in. And so like just checking like, hey, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, are you getting, minimum 2 different fruits and vegetables, different colors in every meal? And trying to just use that as a basis. And then, doing a little bit of an audit of your weekly family food intake. Like, you go grocery shopping, how many different fruits and vegetables do you have in there? What's, a one new one you could eat? If it's asparagus or it's zucchini, trying to just find one more that you can try to create a recipe out of, just trying one new recipe. And there's a ton of different websites with recipes and like gut health recipes and prebiotic fiber recipes. Like, there's so many resources online, but just, maybe just setting the goal of like one new recipe a week to really try to just get the diversity of prebiotic fibers, fruits and vegetables, and polyphenols into the diet, just to help with kind of immune system function, keeping the gut microbiome really fed well. And
Are
then,
there not
no, so go.
Are there things that within that conversation, again, and this can apply to adults or children, are there things within that conversation where you would say absolutely avoid or try as best possible to avoid, because they'll absolutely, wreak havoc on whether, and you and I have talked before about the effects of ADHD and autism and these things, like how foods can actually in your gut impact all these other pieces in your life. So are there things that you would say, if you can, avoid?
Yeah. And I mean, I think we've probably all heard it before, but a lot of just the ultra processed foods. I am not an expert in like exact, foods and, different behavioral conditions. But I did start digging into different basically different probiotics in the gut in different, basically different amounts. Like, what's that population look like, the existence of different microbes, and then how much of those microbes are in the gut, and some really preliminary kind of research around linking some of these gut profiles to kids with diagnosed ADHD or ADD, and different sort of some other like autism spectrum disorders. And I would say that based on my knowledge, and this is not an area I'm not an expert in, but I just started looking into it for personal interest. And what we're learning about the role of different strains and the gut microbiome profile in some of these conditions that we all a lot of us, deal with, is interesting. And I would say that, a lot of the kind of higher processed foods, higher sugar, just those really kind of packaged, wheat-based processed foods. I'm reluctant to say gluten because I feel like that often gets misinterpreted. I did my PhD on like gluten-free diets and FODMAPs. I won't get into what that is, but so I'm reluctant to just throw gluten around as like avoid gluten. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But if our diets tend to be very, very processed wheat-based, I do not think that is an optimal diet for sort of creating a healthy gut microbiome and doing all of the extra things you can do to help regulate that gut-brain axis connection, which can be linked to autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety. And they're so multifactorial. So it's really hard to say this is linked to this, but I'd say there's enough knowledge and evidence to steer you away from, relying a lot of your diet on a lot of processed wheat.
Trying to remove artificial ingredients, I would assume. And again, going back to my history in that Ayurveda topic, there's a lot of powerful nutrition in fruits and vegetables, meats, foods that are very high in nutrients, versus other things that are not. And then the more things that are processed, the more nutrients that get either destroyed or removed. What would be your thoughts on protein intake and how that might impact your gut health?
Absolutely. So I would say just for athletes in general and people in general, if we look at sort of like our habits of how we kind of eat, first, the one thing is and this is probably more for adults, that we are going through that like high sort of metabolic phase where we kind of, we need to get lots of nutrients in to grow and we have bone growth, et cetera. But we've kind of evolved where our working days are long. We eat from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And there's some, one of the researchers out of Australian Catholic University, John Hawley, has done some really good work around just kind of regulating blood glucose and metabolic health around shortening your eating window, basically. Because historically, we didn't eat.
You didn't go to the fridge and pick up
hours a day.
food and have whatever you want.
8 hours a day. So, when I chat with people just, around a dinner table, and they're like, oh, my A1C was like, came back as high. And that's like, I eat really well.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll just ask, what does your eating time look like? Not even what you're eating, but what's your hours in your day where your body is getting nutrients? That's a good thing. But it's also keeping your blood sugar elevated for a lot longer. And there are scenarios with like athletes and stuff where, you just need that. That's not a problem. But with, general pop where we might get a 45-minute workout, probably don't need to fuel that much. But with protein intake and that piece, I usually, there's definitely like a little bit of different evidence around like how much protein you need and how you should eat that protein in terms of how much and the intervals. I would say earlier in my career, the guidelines that we used were based on some really cool studies that looked at like different protein feeding regimes and how your body made protein in response to those. And historically, I would have said, every 3 to 4 hours, 0.3 to 0.5 grams per kilogram body weight of protein. So, 20, 30 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours. Historically, I would have been like, that's really optimal. We need that. There's more evidence showing that, you could do different protein feeding chunks as long as your sort of 24-hour protein feeding is at that, high level that you can probably, for the general person, for general health and maintaining mass, probably achieve the same sort of protein or muscle protein adaptations. But for, really active kids, I try to say like try to have protein every meal and most snacks. Obviously, right before, if you're having something right before training and you just need some fuel, simple carbohydrates, great. But, really trying to not back end the day with protein where maybe breakfast is cereal and milk and you're getting like maybe 5 grams of protein, 10. But really trying to make sure you have like a protein serving. It can be Greek yogurt. It can be, if you like jerkies or fish, salmon, even mixing things up, like doing salmon on toast, smoked salmon on toast in the morning. Just looking for different ways to kind of mix up the diet a little bit.
Okay.
My kid and my husband eat sardines on toast in the morning. I have to leave the room. I cannot stand that smell in the morning. I don't know how they do it. They love it. Some kids like that. So there are like sometimes like thinking outside the box too. And I'll sometimes look at like different cultures. What do different cultures eat for breakfast? If you go to Europe, what do you see at the breakfast for a breakfast spread? It's often quite different from what we eat. There's a lot of like meats and cheese and vegetables and like really, rich sort of rye breads. So if you're looking for ideas, like, check out what some other cultures eat for breakfast too. You can get some ideas outside of the scope of the cereal box.
So, and I know that we could probably have these conversations for a long time, and you're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Again, I just want to say thank you. But what? So if we were to narrow it down, because again, I know we could talk for a while. If we were to narrow it down, what are the do's and don'ts for optimal digestion and optimal performance for, whether it be children or adults? And if we need to separate them, feel free. But that's kind of the question I think people might want to know.
As you can tell, I always have a hard time with very clear blanket statements.
It's
that's just more my academic brain, because I'm always like, there's this context and that context and this nuance. But I would say for optimal digestion, to make sure that what you're eating, you're getting those nutrients into circulation, going where they need to go to adapt to your training and to your health goals. I would say definitely stay hydrated. The next thing would be variety. So make sure that, every meal you have at least, protein serving and at least 2 different kind of fruits and vegetables, and mixing up some of the starchy carbs that you have, not just always relying on, pasta, and trying to mix that up. So variety, hydration, protein, and just getting protein total, and then protein with every meal if you can, and trying to minimize packaged processed foods. And it can be simple things like, we do rely on some packaged processed foods as busy parents. Even things like the That's It bars, which are just like these, they're just fruit, just dried fruit, versus, maybe some of the like builder bars or something that have a whole bunch of
stuff in it.
Like, we think that's good. Oh, we're like, we know our kid needs protein. This bar is really good. But if you really get down to the ingredients, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to put that in my kid's body. And it's not the worst thing if you're stuck at the gas station and you have to buy something. It's not the end of the world, but not being just like the big Costco boxes where that's what you're relying on.
It's high quality whole foods.
Yeah. Look at the ingredients, try to get stuff that, has minimal ingredients and additives.
Are there any supplements or anything in that space that you love or that you feel is sort of over marketed?
I love, honestly, a really good sort of omega supplement, like EPA, DHA supplement. I just think partly for kids' brain health and also just concussion risk.
Okay.
That is something I am adamant about giving my kid. And any parents I talk to, my kid's he's on the free ride ski team, so I'm always trying to get parents to one, of course, there's dietary intake, but I would say most of us probably don't eat fatty fish 3-4 times a week. I don't. And so, just a really good quality product. I use Nordic Naturals a lot. That's probably what most people rely on in North America. It's just a good, it's a high quality product. Vitamin D, and you can get omegas with D. And then I would say certain scenarios, a really good probiotic supplement, especially if your kid has to go on antibiotics. There's a lot of misinformation around taking probiotics and antibiotics together. People be like, oh, you have to wait till after the antibiotic run to take a probiotic. Pendulum has a really good antibiotic protocol on their website. You just Google Pendulum antibiotic protocol. They're a probiotic supplement, but they're a very, very research-based company.
Okay.
But yeah, it would take a really good probiotic just a few hours away from your antibiotic. So it's not going to it's not going to stop your antibiotic from doing its job, but it's going to help reduce the detrimental effect to your gut microbiome. And there's a few other things you can do with food and stuff to help mitigate the negative aspects of taking antibiotics. So I would say, just having a really good probiotic available. I use for just a general multi-strain. I use seed. They have a pediatric formulation as well.
I'm not sure if it's sold here in Canada.
It is. You can order it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can order it. You just have to go to their website and it's there. I really like seed. And then for very targeted sort of metabolic stuff, blood glucose control, IBS symptoms, I use Pendulum has very research-based strains. So it's not huge multi-strain. It's very targeted. And the one thing with probiotics, there's probiotics in everything. Most of them don't actually get through the gut. So the companies that I mentioned, and I'm not like affiliated or anything, the companies that I mentioned though, they've done a lot of work in figuring out the capsule science to make sure that some of the strains that are very susceptible to like your acidic environment get through the gut and can colonize. So that's sort of the difference between those and like the stuff you might buy at the pharmacy.
And I think you mentioned before that there are like marketed foods that say they're marketed to have probiotics, and you're saying, some of that is BS.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say like if you really want to modulate the gut microbiome, you're going to need like a supplement or a targeted supplement to really change things substantially to help maintain like a healthy gut microbiome. Yeah, yogurts and fermented foods and stuff, that's all good. But it's not going to be enough to really change something if you have, killed off some strains or something through antibiotics. But there are a lot. There's like these probiotic, prebiotic sodas, and there's no way those microbes survive through any of that processing and then through your gut. And it's just, don't waste your money on that.
So what I want to do is maybe what we can do is hop on another call and maybe focus on something specific. But I think for today, in terms of just general overview and basics and giving people an understanding, and also letting people know, hey, like Dr. Dana Lis is a great wealth of information, and you can still get some more on social media, on the Performance Nutritional Professionals Instagram, And there's so much more information. So I'd like to do this again. I'd like to cover more information. I'd like to maybe dig into something specific.
For sure, yeah.
But I'm hoping that if you feel comfortable with today, having provided a solid overview, and then we can dig in a little deeper in future.
Yeah, I'd love to for sure. And we did do, Jen and I did a webinar with one of the RDs, or registered dietitians from Pendulum, who's a really an expert in the microbiome and microbiome testing space. So we did kind of like this back and forth webinar where I provided like more about the athlete's gut and microbiome, and she went into some of the really specifics around, hey, if you're getting microbiome testing, it's a little bit still in its infancy, but here's what we can learn from it. Here's what you want to look out for. So just from that, I've definitely had quite a few friends that have spent several $100s on microbiome testing, and then they have to spend several hundred more to get that report downloaded and analyzed to them. And then they're like,
yeah,
that's like $1,000 later, and I still don't know what I'm supposed to do.
So why don't we, if you don't mind me asking, why don't we, I know I talked earlier before we jumped on here, but why don't we maybe do that like live Instagram, and maybe we can get people to ask questions. I think there'll be more that come out of this, but
yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to say thank you so much again for today. I am very grateful that you've given me your time. And I guess for now, this is the Raising Men podcast. We are again with Dr. Dana Lis, and we will provide some more information. We'll dig into some things a little deeper. And yeah, thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.
Thank you so much for your time today. I hope all the best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Thank you.